Let's talk about Intersection Masker. Intersection Masker is a plugin that was introduced a few versions ago in ZBrush. And what it does is it takes a single subtool and it will mask where two separate meshes intersect in that subtool. So to illustrate this, I've got this Z tool, which you can actually open. It's with the downloads for this particular chapter. If we go to Subtool, you see that there is just a single subtool here. Intersection Masker will not mask between subtools. It only masks on a single mesh. And if we go into frame mode, you can see that this model, these are two separate meshes. They just happen to be merged together into one subtool. So that's very important. If these were dynameshed together, it would not work. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, Intersection Masker will look at where these volumes intersect and it will generate a mask based on that. Now that can be very useful for hard surface and mech creation inside of ZBrush. It can be useful for creating costume elements. It can be useful in 3D printing. If you have a costume on a character that you're going to send for 3D print, Intersection Masker can be used to help you visualize where that costume is actually intersecting with the mesh underneath. That's something very, very important because if you've got hollows there, if you've got a void behind a shirt and between the shirt and the body, that could create a wall that's too thin to actually print. So you could end up with errors in your print or you could end up with breakage. There's a variety of other applications for it. I'm sure you can come up with others. Let's take a look at how it works. We go to the Z plugin menu and tear this off. And we have Intersection Masker right here. It's very, very simple. It's just a single button. So if we press Intersection Mask, it's going to start thinking and it's going to actually generate a mask for us. So let's click that. ZBrush will be thinking about this. It uses union remeshing to do this. You might recognize that from the Gizmo Deformers lecture where we talked about remesh by union. And there we go. It doesn't look like anything necessarily happened, but if I Control-Shift-Click to isolate this polygroup, you can see it has created a mask based on the intersections there. Now there's a variety of things that we could do with this. I'm going to go ahead and click Split Hidden to split out those pieces that were previously intersecting, and we'll just turn off visibility on those. So now, with this masked area, I could do a mesh extraction, or I could create a polygroup. Let's do that. Let's go to polygroups, and let's group mask. So we go into frame mode. Now you see we have a polygroup around those masked areas. Let's turn off frame mode. And if we've got polygrouping, that means that we can come up to geometry and edge loop, and we could do things like group loop, or we could do panel looping. So let's do panel looping here. Let's turn up our panel looping thickness and click panel loops. And what that will do, it cuts a loop around each one of those polygroups. If I go back to my visibility, you'll see that these actually register right there with the pieces that they came out of. If we zoom in, you can see they actually line right up. If I undo that, maybe we want to make this a little bit bigger. So right now we've got it at 0.05. Let's set that to 0.08. And then we'll do panel looping again. And now we should get a little bit more clearance there. There we go. And I will go to deformation. Let's turn on solo so we can just see that. Go to deformation and go to polish by features. Turn on the radial button and polish by features. And that should smooth out those areas for us. Give us a little bit of a nicer edge there. Turn off solo. And now you can see we've created sockets for those pieces that we're intersecting. And I can further polish these if I choose to. Perhaps we can do a polish by groups. It's quite a dense mesh that might take a moment. You can also experiment with turning on and off the radial buttons here to see what types of effects you get. You see that by turning on that radial button, I get a nicer smooth on that area. So here we can create these nice sockets where these pieces are intersecting. So we've got a mechanical interface there based around these pieces that were countersunk into the mesh. So that automatically we're very easily able to go in there and start adding complexity and interest to this surface. So let's take a look at how this works on a different Z tool. I'm going to switch over to a character in costume. So here I've got a model of a superhero. The superhero is wearing a cowl, and that cowl has been decimated for 3D print, and the head underneath is decimated for 3D print. Now, anytime you have two meshes that intersect with one another, they're considered a single volume by 3D printer. Now, where you run into problems is underneath this hood. If any of these areas are not actually intersecting with the face underneath, you're going to have a void there, and that 3D printer will see that void and treat that as a hollow. So you might end up with a very, very thin membrane of plastic here instead of a thickness that you want. So we can use Intersection Masker to determine if this is actually intersecting with the head underneath. So we'll do that by going up here. We've got the head in a folder. And again, this file is also available for you to follow along with. I'll click the gear icon and I will click Merge Folder. And that's going to take the cowl and the head and make a new subtool. And it turns off visibility on the folder. So let's select this subtool and turn on solo mode. Go into frame mode. And you can see now these bits are a single mesh. So let's once again create intersection mask. And it will do the same thing. It will generate this masking. Now, for this to work, both meshes, or all the meshes, have to be watertight. You can't have holes in them, so you need to hole fill it for it to actually function. So it's finished doing its mask. It doesn't look like anything happened, but if I Control-Shift-Click to hide the head, you can see the masked areas there are where the face is intersecting. If I Control-Shift-Click and drag on the background, you can see the corresponding faces on the head. Now, anywhere where it's unmasked, that means that the cowl is not intersecting the head in those areas, so that's a potential problem. So how can we fix that easily? Well, let's clear that mask and let's invert our visibility. Here we've got the decimated cowl. It's the superhero's mask. Let's go to Polygroups. Under Tool, Polygroups, we have an option for Group by Normals. Let's turn that on and click Group by Normals. And what this will do is it will give us a polygroup for the inner shell, the thickness, and the outer shell. Now I can Control-Shift-Click, mask everything, Control-Shift-Click on the head, mask the head. So now what we've got is we've got the head masked, the outer shell masked, and the thickness masked, and the inner shell here is not masked. I'm going to go to Display Properties and turn on double-sided so it'll be very clear to us if we have anything that's sort of peeking through the back faces. So if this mesh interpenetrates. So let's go ahead now. Let's clear that mask. So you see I've got an inner shell. There we go. Let's hide that. I've got an inner shell, a thickness, and an outer shell. So I am going to turn on my X symmetry. I will go to the Move Brush, go to Brush, Auto Masking, and I'm going to turn on Backface Mask. But I'm going to turn Backface Mask down to -100. So that will protect any mesh details on the front. But if I hold, oops, let's go to the Move Brush. Backface Mask, -100. Now, if I press the Alt key and push, that's only going to push in the faces on the inside because I have backface masking turned on at -100. So hold the Alt key down and then press, and that's going to push those faces in, preserving the outer faces. So let's Control-Shift-Click. There we go. I'm going to Control-Shift-Click on the character's head and mask this. I'm going to turn off frame mode so it's a bit easier to see. And I'm just going to keep pressing the Alt key and pushing in using the Move Brush. Now what's going to happen is we will now have countersunk all those faces into the head. So we can double check this by clearing our mask and then doing another intersection mask. And you remember what that intersection mask looked like the first time. It was very patchy and there were, spots of white and spots of gray. So once this is completed, we can hide the cowl, and there you can see the intersection is almost complete. We have a little bit of a problem area up there at the top, and we have a little problem area right there. Now, because that's going to be hidden, you could potentially just build out those areas. So if I took the clay tubes brush and just built this area out, and then built this area out, and then revealed all again. Let's go ahead and mask the cowl. And then I will smooth those little interpenetrating areas there so they go back inside the helmet, or the mask, I should say. Smooth these bits that are sticking out. And now we'll do another intersection mask, and we should see that those have gone away. Go into frame mode, make sure everything's looking good, and intersection mask. So once again, it will process, and in just a moment, we'll have our mask. And there we go. So if I Control-Shift-Click, you can see it's much, much better than before. Looks like we've got a couple areas there that we have problems with. So what I'll do is pull these out. Use the Move brush, just pull those out. And mask the helmet, or keep calling it a helmet, mask the mask. And then I'll just use the Trim Dynamic brush and just tap that a couple times just to get that right inside. There we go. Clear the mask, and now we'll do our intersection mask again. So it's a very, very easy way for us to see exactly what's happening in a really hard area to see, the inside, the inner shell of this particular object. So let's clear that, and there we go. So we've got a real nice intersection mask now. And I would carry that on down the shoulders just to make sure that all those costume elements were actually fitting together properly. So just use the Move brush. Let's hide the head. And we'll just use our Move brush to push these faces in. You can see now, if I come over here, and I'll try and do this in an angle so you can see what's happening, it's just pushing those faces directly in, just like so. And because this will be 3D printed, we don't need to worry about the intersections in there. We really want those to occur. There you can see we've got a little bit of masking that's been caught there. Let's clear that mask, and then hold down the Alt key and push those in. And we'll hold down Smooth, and we'll just smooth the inside here a little bit. Push that in. Look for any other problem areas. That should be good. And let's intersection mask. There we go. Let's isolate the head. And here you can see we've got a solid intersection mask here with the exception of the underside of the chin here. So we'll just take our Move brush and push that in. Make sure that we clear any masking. Push that in, and let's try that again. There we go, and isolate the head. There we go. Now you can see we've got a successful mask. So this just assures us that those areas are intersecting. Now, if I want to split these out, I can hide the head. Let's go ahead and invert visibility and clear that mask. And I will go to Subtool, Split, Split Hidden. So now I've got two separate subtools for the head and the mask again. So that's how we can utilize Intersection Masker to determine whether or not two volumes for a 3D print are actually intersecting. Of course, there's a myriad other uses for this that you can come up with as you're working in ZBrush. Anytime you can find a use for creating a mask between the intersection of two objects that you can then use to make more geometry or to add further complexity to a form, it's the go-to plugin. It's easily missed too because it's just this one button hidden up here in the Z plugin menu, but I personally have found it very useful for problem solving for a variety of reasons inside of ZBrush, and I encourage you to just keep it in the back of your head and see if that can be of use to you as well. So that was Intersection Masker. It's the Z plugin that's available inside of ZBrush's Z plugin menu. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next lesson.